And now, a special presentation.
All right. It's afternoon in South Korea, and it's late at night in Alberta.
In Alberta, that's right, yeah.
I have the great pleasure to be speaking with Kevin Madison, who is not going to be our dungeon muser for this evening. He's going to be something else. And I thought that we would talk today about a project that I know he's been involved in for a few years, which is a charity kind of marathon gaming project. And so rather than me try and describe it to you when he's right here, Kevin, what is this charity thing you got going on?
Thank you, Anthony. So howdy for everyone who's viewing. My name's Kevin Madison. I'm the host of the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel and the Dungeon Musings podcast. And the charity that Anthony's referring to is something that we call Heroes Save Villages. It's a charity fundraising initiative that we've had on the channel for about a little more than 2 years now in different iterations, and the charity has always, or Heroes Save Villages at least, has always benefited SOS Children's Villages International, which is this really amazing organization that is active in over 130 countries, providing advocacy and, more importantly, direct benefits for over 80,000 orphan and abandoned children from around the world, doing these, setting up effectively villages where they hire and train. Sorry, that's Anna Banana making noise in the background.
Awesome.
They hire and train these young women to act as effectively surrogate mothers for villages of children. And it's a way to provide kids with a stable and supportive kind of environment they need, in those formative years. And then they go on to, to live a normal, or at least as normal as adult life is afterwards, without having to struggle through the challenges that come from, in particular being orphaned and abandoned in developing countries where there's just not a lot of infrastructure for kids to otherwise, be caught.
How did you get connected to the charity initially?
So years ago, in my day job, I'm a lawyer, but before that I was in grad school, so I'm doubly insufferable. And when I was in grad school, I studied poli-sci, and the thing I was really interested in was sub-Saharan African politics, and in particularly environmental politics in sub-Saharan Africa. And the frustration I had with that particular career path was that you were studying a lot of it was very it felt like rubbernecking with problems that you would hope that you could try and do something with. And at the time, but when I was transitioning from grad school into law school, I decided to try and publish some gaming stuff. So at the time, Mutants Mastermind 2nd edition was out, and I had created a line of characters and had some products planned that were going to be basically kind of taking like real world politics, or the real world, the sensibilities of real world politics, and applying it to kind of a superhero setting. It's a very trite thing now, but in that very kind of like, early 2000s Warren Ellis kind of vibe, that's kind of what I was trying to go for. And then I also thought that there would be a good way, rather than just trying to just create, talk about these issues, it would be a good way to raise money. So you're not only raising awareness of the challenges that, in particular, some of these kids face. You're also able to. I was going to be donating profits, foolishly thinking there would be any profits from a small gaming company. So nothing ever came of that, unfortunately, because I again woefully underestimated how busy I'd be in law school. That went by the wayside, but I always kept thinking about SOS Children's Villages International, just because it was such a terrific organization. They respond really, really well to inventive fundraising. So if you want to do something that's a little non-traditional, they were very much behind the idea of publishing these things. So when it came time for me to make a decision about making a charity fundraising thing on the channel, I naturally gravitated back towards them. Before I did that, though, I did go through. There are different indices you can check online to make sure that it gauges the effectiveness of the dollars that you're donating to things, and SOS Children's Villages International has an enormously high rating for money that actually gets through to the people who are benefiting from it, from independent organizations. So I loved the goal of the organization, and like what better kind of match could you have for gaming related activities than kids?
Right.
You
And
know,
that is the major concern, isn't it? I mean, that the activity that you do can seem inappropriate to the people who are on the receiving end, and they're falsely polite. Like back in the old days with the blood drives for Vampire, there was a certain amount of squeamish reaction to that, I think. But the other thing is how many dollars disappear into infrastructure for so many different charitable organizations.
Yeah, and that was something that like the things that it was a carryover from my grad studies, is just that I was aware that not all NGOs or non-governmental organizations are made alike. So it was important to make sure that if we were fundraising for them, to make sure that the money was going to them and not disappearing in some other way. And fortunately, it's been terrific. And to date, we've raised a little over $5,000 for the kids, and that's through our. I do a combination of different things on there. We have specific prizes. So every year I'll put up, I think it's been 6 every year. Start of the year, I put up 6 charity sessions. I say I'll run a 4-hour session for you, your friends, or you and whatever, for whoever donates. Donate $100, and then those are gone usually pretty quickly, which is quite nice because it's a good way to start the year with getting some money into the into the program. And then I had it was kind of stupid because I had purchased this thing. The original grand prize for the first time we did this raffle was the Dragon Heist box set from Beadle and Grimm. If you're not familiar with them, Beadle and Grimm make these beautiful deluxe editions of the 5th edition D&D adventures. They started with Dragon Heist, and then moving forward, they've been doing a new one each time. And they're gorgeous products. The business is a passion project for Matt Lillard and his his grade school gaming buddies. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm never going to use this. Because I don't really run a lot of 5th edition and whatnot, and I wanted to do something with that. So I thought, all right, I'll offer this as a gaming prize. And then I had a bunch of other crap that was kicking around. And then in addition for that first raffle, I took the time to contact a bunch of gaming companies, and we had like Cubicle 7 and Cubicle 7, Modifius, Pelgrane Press. I don't want to leave people out because there were so many. It's all small press places too. Which, sorry?
Paizo
did not get back to us. Wizards did not get back to us. You know what? I mean, in fairness to them, they do it. Both of those companies do a fair amount of other stuff. And I think, so I mean, and some Yahoo, contact them out of the blue saying this is what they're doing. The
Never
company
done this before,
has been exactly the company that was phenomenal was and really went above and beyond. It was Beadle and Grimm because from the time of the first one, they at the time they had just put out the Dragon Heist. It was their first product they put out. They also sent us a copy of their second release, which was the Sinister Silver edition of Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And then they've sent us a copy of everything they've put out so far. These are limited editions. They're really, I mean, they're not cheap. So it's been very, very. We've been very fortunate to have the ability to have such incredible support from some of these publishers. Yeah, it's great. I mean, and the last charity raffle raised $1,700, and this year we're almost at 1,000 already, and it's only been going for a couple of weeks. So that's. It's good, and
so how are you running the raffle? How does that work?
So what we do is, I mean, I hawk it every time we stream. I stream 4 times a week, and we hawk it every time we do that. I also try to the way it works mechanically is people will go to the Hero Save Villages website. It's I can't remember what the website is now because they just changed their service provider for it, but. What I'll do is I'll send Anthony a link to it too, so I imagine it's going to be in the description of this video.
Put it down there.
There you go. And what you do is you go there, you click on, and you donate for every $25 Canadian between for the raffle, at least between now and September 1st, 2020. you get one chance to win one of the prizes. And the prizes this time include a gold edition Eberron Rising from the Last War box set, which is right there. That's mine. But they sent us a brand new copy as well, which is awesome. I've also picked up 2 copies of the Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea core rulebook to donate. We got someone who's made a chainmail dice bag, who's one of our regular players. We've got a Skittermander dice bag. We've got a bunch of stuff. And then what I'm going to do is the donation cutoff is September 1st, 2020. And then what I do is that evening I do a live draw. But because I run a lot of old school games on the channel, I do it old school style. So we create a random encounter table for all the people. So every ticket has that. And I've got this big oversized dice up there that I use. Right. And I roll it on camera to show what the random encounter is. So it's pretty good. Like, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of very generous donors donate to the thing so far, and it's great, and I mean I'm not sure, like, I know you don't stream, at least you don't stream a lot of games on your YouTube channel. A lot of it is more commentary, but for streaming stuff, like, I've never when we started off, when I started off the channel, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it. I wasn't looking for a transition into a different career, because there's no faster way to kill the joy in something than being paid for it, or trying to be paid for it.
Right.
So I knew I didn't want to do that. So what I thought was, for a long time, was we were going to do just charity fundraising. We've transitioned since then to we run ads on the channel now, and we have a Patreon and whatnot. But all that money goes towards the players instead of me, because it's really, to be honest, not all that much money anyway. So it's not like, it's going to make a big difference, and it's a way to thank the players for their involvement. And it doesn't interfere with anything we offer through the charity, like the charity sessions or the raffle prizes and stuff like that. That seems to be, from the first year of us doing that, that's the stuff that attracts donations. It's not other stuff. It's not, people aren't kicking money into the charity just to support the channel, so right. We didn't feel like it was taking money out of the hands of the donors, at least.
Good. Well, I like the tag. I like the idea of heroes save villages, and that there are multiple avenues in. The first game this year, I think was the first game, was Savage Worlds.
Yes.
The new Adventure Edition.
Yes,
which you did with a Roman theme. So just to give us an idea, like, we pony up the cash. We want to be heroes. We contact you, and then what?
Yeah. So what happens is my roster of players are, I have it. So what has developed is that I have a roster of players that I play with regularly, and the reason for that is because, to be honest, for ease of organization, like, there's nothing worse than trying to organize players and whatnot. Regular viewers of my channel will know that, like, I hate canceling sessions, so I'd rather run an impromptu one shot than I would, adjourn a session because we're down too many players. And I never really, when I grew up, I never really played with I played with my friends, and that was really it. It wasn't until I started running, streaming games on the channel, and it can be a mixed bag when you're running with different people. Different people get different things out of their gaming, and they want different games as well too, and they want to have different approaches to the games and whatnot. So it's sometimes there's just a bad fit between who the player is and who the DM is, and so forth. And we've hit a really good groove with that. So what I generally do is, the donors will then, I've got my first donor ever, my buddy George, who's a regular on our channel. George was the first one to donate, and for the first time we had the thing up, and that's before he became a regular player. He was a viewer. We set up the first time for Hero Save Villages, and he donated within about 15 minutes, which was amazing. And then his session was all with his friends, but for the most part, the other ones have been with roster players. But the players aren't they're not obliged to play any of the games. They play because we like playing together. So what I'll do is I'll say, hey, I'm running this I'm running this session. Does anyone want to play in this? Does this interest anybody? That's nice. What I do is, the players are phenomenal. Like, the people. This is why I'm happy to kick the money back to the players and try and give them ways of saying thank you, because they're just fantastic, a fantastic group of folks to play with. But what do they do? So if they get one of the charity sessions, they let me know what they want to run or what they want to play, and who they want to play with, and then from there I write the whole session. So I'll write a session that's going to be a 4-hour session. It usually spills over a little bit because sometimes I'm a little over ambitious with what I want to do in a one shot. Right? I'm sure that's a problem that you and everyone listening is familiar with.
I don't think I've run a game on the channel meant for a one shot that was a one shot.
Exactly. So but for these ones, because people are donating their actual money for it too, I really try and go above and beyond to really make it a memorable, something really, a really, really good session. In past, I've run Fantasy Flight's Star Wars. I've run Modiphius's Conan. I've run Pathfinder First Edition, Pathfinder Second Edition. This time it was actually pretty cool. So we had George was the first donor. He was one of the executive producers on the Netflix show October Faction. So I had run, as a congratulations for him for having the show come out, I wrote a one-shot set in the 70s for October Faction. So I surprised him with it. We had some of the roster players play, and I custom made a cinematic horror thing using Mongoose Traveler.
Oh.
And it was just
nice level of lethality.
it was crazy. I edited in a bunch of other custom stuff. I really I made the game that I needed for that particular session. Every character had a specific secret, and when they revealed the secret, it would trigger something so they had better abilities. So there was an incentive for them to reveal their, not to give spoilers for the show, but the show's all about secrets and whatever. So I wanted to have that model in a game mechanic. Nice. So the first owner, Arlen, another one of our regular players, he requested something. He said, I want to play something that is horror on the frontier of the Roman Empire in the 1st century. I don't care what. He said, I love the October Faction session, so whatever you want to run, go nuts. And sometimes I get clear marching orders like that. I want to play an adventure of blank. We've got one that's going to be this year for Carl, another one of our players. He wants a Pathfinder Second Edition session where everyone's playing Lizard Men. So I'm going to write that. So we're going to do one. Exactly. So it's cool. I mean, the thing that's fun about that is I like the challenge of having people telling me what they want to play as well too. Sure. This is this is a labor of love for me, the channel and streaming games and whatnot. So I tend to really only run something that I'm really invested in. So it's nice to be pushed outside of the not comfort zone, but the groove that you get into, where sometimes you just end up running the same game and it becomes an easy kind of go-to thing. So I had not run Savage Worlds in quite some time, so it just felt like a good opportunity to model the kind of pulpy horror thing that the player wanted or the donor wanted.
Right.
And that's what we go through. So every one of the charity games ends up being this whole different adventure to dive in. And and then in some cases we've had people who have been repeat donors too. So they've come back and we've done sequels to the previous sessions. So
I really am gripped by the ethos of the whole thing. I mean, just one, donating time to a valuable charity, but also the idea of I want you to participate in the game. Let's play together. Let's be positive. Let's enjoy our hobby together while accomplishing something else. But also let's push the borders. Let's try a game I haven't played in ever, or let's make a new game, or that's one of the reasons why I got into doing YouTube videos at all. Yeah, lament my friends don't want to play anymore, or there is no time, or my friends only want to play the game that we used to play. They don't want to try anything new. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Really? Let's see if we can work on that.
Well, it's funny because all the people I play, all of our roster players, I consider them all my friends. But it's funny. Not funny, but it's interesting having a different experience where you're playing with people who want to play the games and you also are friends with them, as opposed to playing games with your friends. Because if you're playing games with your friends, you're playing to a predetermined audience, which will have a way of self-selecting what you're going to run, because you'll know that, oh, so-and-so, player X hates anything that's not fantasy. So I'm not running Star Trek, I'm not running travel, I'm not running whatever else. Whereas with the roster players, it's, all right, I want to run this, and we also see a ton of the players also doing the same thing with the roster players, where they're saying, hey, I'm going to run this. Does anyone want to play? And then you get people buying in to play the game that they want to actually play, or that that they actually are interested in playing, as opposed to humoring a friend because they want to run, Ars Magica, right? And you're like, no one else is into Ars Magica, but they're like, fuck it, I'll go along with you because.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll make
exactly.
my grog now. Yeah. I love Ars Magica.
It's a great game. I've never. It's funny, Ars Magica. I did not get it until there was an interesting Twitter thread that was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where someone was talking about expectations of play, and it's part of what fed it for my recent obsession with old school play, about the play structure that the game engenders. And what they were talking about is sort of incentive structures in the games. And in old school, they were talking about how the fact that you get XP from and character advancement from gold is one of the reasons, as opposed to just killing things or role playing or whatever. That
was not necessary to kill anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And what they were saying too is with Ars Magica, the game's not about your individual character, your grog, the adventures, or whatever else. The game is about the Covenant.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's the thing about this game that I've never clued into. It's about
that's the hook,
shared.
Right? And, they were huge Pendragon fans, and Pendragon's about the family, and
yeah.
So, yeah. So, what was the most unusual request you've gotten for this event? It sounds like maybe the October faction may have been.
Well, that wasn't a request. That was something I was happy to do. I like trying to, my perspective is that I want everyone to have as much fun as they can have, right? I always want to make sure the players come away feeling, wow, that was a shit ton of fun. I'll remember that, because those are my favorite sessions as well. Yeah. And for that one, it was just a way of saying thank you to one of our players, and I thought it'd be a fun, unique kind of way of doing that. I used to do that for birthdays and things like that as well too. When with my real friends, I would see in actual in actual life, as opposed to
when we were allowed to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But the most unusual one this year is for me to play in something. Someone wants me to play in a. I can't remember if it's Microscope. So like I've seen videos of Microscope being played. I don't own it, but I'm going to pick it up between now and when the session is, and it sounds like a lot of fun. So that one seems the most unusual. Otherwise, there's not really been stuff. Often the people, because of the sort of the reach of the channel, it's generally players, viewers who are donating. So it's folks who are only familiar with the charity because of watching my channel. So it's rare that sometimes I'll have. I'm trying to think if I've had anything that I hadn't run previously suggested. When Star Wars was suggested at that time, I'd kind of left that system behind because I kind of I have issues with the way I feel that game's got feet in two different styles of games, and it makes for an untenable long-term play.
Ooh. Those are fighting words.
I know you're a big fan of it. It may not. So
I had the same reaction until I got it to the table, and then 3.5 years later, when I said, "Look, I really have to play other games." I got this stack of stuff that I need to play face to face because of the way the dice work or some other component or something. At 3.5 years, I said, "Look, we've had players move away. It's time to." It's time to try something else. But that
how much house ruling do you do? How much house ruling do you do in your games?
Almost none.
Wow.
And everything I'm trying to think of, when do I house rule? I'll house rule if I don't understand, can't remember, don't have the book. But then that bothers me, and I'll go home and I'll find out the way it's supposed to work, and then I'll go back and say, this is the way it's supposed to work, and we're going to do it that way from So yeah, I play raw.
Nice. Yeah, that's something that I house rule everything. I think I run. I end up tweaking everything.
Right out of the gate before you've used it, or after you didn't
I'll
like
use
it?
them sometimes. It's funny because I've had some reaction from some folks we played with and some folks that we are viewers about it, and I mean, I'm not telling. I would never tell anyone else how they should or should not play their games, and it annoys me when people try and tell me how I should be approaching games. And we sometimes get that, like, well, you should really run it for X amount of time before you start making your changes. Like, why? Why on earth would I care about that? The only game that I'm ever going to be experiencing is going to be the game at my table.
Well, that's true.
So I don't care how it's written. I don't care how it was designed to go or whatnot. All I care about is the experience at my table. And so long as you've got players who are on board with that and they understand, because there's certain games that, like, especially the more crunch heavy games, that lean towards it. You need to be running them as close to rules as written as possible, because there are decisions made at the character creation stage that only flow through if you've made those decisions. But for games like Star Wars, the thing I found unsatisfying with that is it seems for a game that is so cinematic, or intended to be so cinematic in so many ways, it drives me nuts that there's no real narrative metacurrency you can use to alter dice rolls. It seems crazy to me that they haven't thought of that, because, like, scene editing seems like something that every other cinematic game already incorporates, and the fact that you're stuck with whatever the dice roll is, like the dice roll, don't get me wrong, they're dramatic and they're fun and whatnot too, but giving the players a little agency over that, a la like Savage Worlds bennies or whatnot, or something akin to Momentum or Fate from is that what it's called, Fate in Moebius Conan, where you can actually adjust the stuff, spend some of that narrative metacurrency.
Momentum,
yeah.
Fortune points.
Yeah. Fortune points. Thank you. Yeah.
Well,
so
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no,
I think, personally, I mean, we're not talking about Star Wars, but personally, I have struggled over the years with metacurrencies. I like the dice to be the dice. I've invoked them as my co-conspirator, as the game master, and they absolve me of blame, they absolve me of guilt or whatever, but they also inspire me to describe. So I tend not to play, I've noticed, really swingy systems with a great degree of variance of outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
But I also will avoid ones that really force that bell curve on you, where you're going to be okay, probably. So it's kind of an awkward place to sit. So then I find games like Ubiquity, where I can do both, and or systems like Ubiquity, and then with Fantasy Flight Games, there is no meta currency to edit. And I would posit that because the system at best is going to be medium speed, you'll wind up in analysis paralysis if you can, that result is terrible. Why don't you spend a point to fix it? Oh, well, how could I fix? I think maybe they stayed away from it for speed reasons. But then the other thing is the math, the distribution of the results. I find it leads to moderate success with a little bit of threat is the most average.
What
outcome.
XP did your characters get to? How high up in XP did they get?
Closer to 2,000 than 1,000.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, see, we only got up to around 300 XP in ours, and I found that the dice pools got so big that the dice results we were seeing were never consistent. Like, there wasn't ever the intuitive, like, oh, my character has X amount of things, so I'll know how it's going to work out. It was always all over the place, and that just got frustrating for us.
Sure,
I mean, and the house rules I run it with now, I cap the dice pool at 10. So 5 positive dice, 5 negative dice, never anything more than that. So you're never, you're not rolling. I've never learned the names of the dice, but you're not rolling like, you know,
Yeah.
5 purples and, you know, 3 blacks and whatever. Like it just, it wouldn't
true.
run that way.
But
I
you
mean,
also
it's,
are
you know,
running a lot of games. You're running 4 nights a week, 5 nights a
4
week?
nights a week. Yep. 4 nights a week. And then normally we used to like up until the start of the current crisis, if folks are listening at the time of the pandemic, we were rotating a bunch of different games. I had about 6 games. Is that right? 5 or 6 games that I would rotate through over the span of a 2-week cycle. And then we'd have different games on Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturday mornings and Sunday afternoons, my local time.
Right.
And then since the pandemic started, we've streamlined things partly for mental health reasons, for just to, you know, so I wasn't trying to balance all those different games, and also to give more players an opportunity to get to the table. So we switched over to there's 2 days a week of AD&D on Wednesdays and Fridays, and 2 days a week, 1 day a week minimum of AD&D on the weekend. And then we also run, we alternate between AD&D second and Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. So it's a lot of old school games now, which was kind of nice to get back to Savage Worlds, you know, last week. But those games, you know, like the thing that another sort of a way I think about games too is right tool for right job, right? Like I wouldn't use ADD second edition to run every fantasy adventure I'd want to run, but for a big group where you aren't focusing on individual story, it's a fantastic choice of you know, weapon, as it were. We regularly have 7 or 8 players. We have massive, you know, confrontations, so you're able to model that kind of epic scale of stuff. And because I like all games I run, I house rule the hell out of it. To be honest, it has more sensibilities closer to modern play, where like their characters are certainly a lot more durable. But it isn't. We've had deaths in the campaign, and all the campaigns, only two of the campaigns we've had deaths in, and it makes for some interesting, because it's a limited resource I have for the narrative metacurrency that keeps them, you know, keeps their bacon going. It really ratchets up that tension when they're down to 1 or none of the metacurrency. And I also use a group pool for it too. So the players are all drawing from the same pool, so they're all seem to getting lower and lower. But it's been good, and we've seen not only from the player pool too, but even seeing the viewers as well too. Like seeing viewers have something they can come back to and engage with on a regular basis, and seeing their, you know, the crazy stuff those characters get up to on a regular basis is really, it's nice.
Sounds good. But how often do you get to play as a player? Or do you want to?
I rarely play. To be honest, like, I mean, given the choice, I'll always run something. I prefer to DM than I would to play. And it's not because I play about maybe like 4 times a year on average. And if that, it's just so one of the games we ran at the start of last year was a Delta Green game, and what I tried to fuse was Delta Green fused with Pellegrini's Dracula Dossier. Right. Because the Dracula Dossier is just a phenomenal product, and I really want to run it, but I can't get my brain to click quite with Night's Black Agents, the game that it's designed for. Right. So I was like, all right, I'm going to run this, and I was going to do it would be a fun little switcheroo for the players. And the way I executed it just didn't work out terribly well. And then there were players who just were not, they're struggling with transitioning to mystery games. I don't know if you've had this experience as well, but like, I find sometimes players who are more familiar with a D&D kind of approach to how you engage the story and how you proceed through that, sometimes they need a chance to be like, okay, hold on, let's talk about how mysteries differ from going on quests and things like that. You approach the story in the way that you drive things forward is different. Yeah. So we needed to do that a little more, and I got to a point where I just felt it really wasn't, it wasn't going to be a successful game, and I pulled a pin on it. We never had resolution. We didn't do a wrap up. For myself, I value my time, so right. When I don't feel the game is working, I'll pull the pin on it and I'll try something different. And similarly with when I play, like I prefer not to bail on campaigns if I commit to something. And the last campaign I did try playing in, I really wasn't enjoying it a lot, and I was feeling like I could have been spending the time, to be honest, working day job stuff instead. So did that. What works better for me and my schedule with this streaming and whatnot is playing one shots.
Right.
Well, same reason I had, like, Anthony runs an awesome play-by-post Mithras game online as well too, and I really wanted to play that. And then just as soon as I realized how much time I actually had available, it was difficult, so I had to drop out of it. But for one shots though, like, I mean, I got a chance to play Trudvang recently, Trudvang Chronicles, which was super, super cool. I got a chance to play in a couple one ring sessions last game. I like the kinds of games that I run are not necessarily the games I want to play either.
Absolutely.
Only because like a lot of the old school games, they really shine with long-term play. You know, if I design the kind of like exciting set piece things that I would have in, say, Pathfinder 2nd Edition or D&D 4th or maybe D&D 5th, you're probably going to kill characters with D&D 2nd, so it's not really the right tool for that thing.
Right.
But for games where I get a chance to play support stuff or just role play, those things I love jumping into for one shots. But ongoing games now, like if it comes down to time for me to be able to run some games or for me to play in a long-term game, I'd sooner run a long-term game. What about you? Do you play more? You run more? Or do you mix of the two?
It depends on where I am in life or along the timeline. So we moved to this city. I live in Daejeon. We moved here, and so that was a kind of like a reboot of my gaming group.
Sure.
So my gaming group in Seoul was up to 9 people at one point, and it's just normal for me that if you're in the group, you run games. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be me, you all the way around, and then game number 10, it's me again. But everybody runs games because why wouldn't you? But moving here, I wound up with a group of players, most of whom had only ever been players and hadn't played, a whole lot. So it was, at certain points in their lives, they'd been together with other people who ran games and they played. But the Star Wars fever grabbed them, and so once I saw that they were truly in love with our Saturday game, then it's like, okay, when are you going to run so that I get to play? So maybe a third of the time or up to 50% of the time, I can be a player. Yeah, we did an all-for-one Regime Diabolique campaign on my channel. And originally we had 4 players, and so that was me sharing that setting and that system with them. So I ran a session, and then the next person ran a session, and then the next, and the next, then it was back to me. So it's in a cycle. So we're all responsible for the same setting, right? When you're running, your character is on duty as a musketeer doing musketeer things, but and
that's awesome. That's a great idea of how to structure it too. Like, I'm fortunate that like everyone I play with runs games, which is pretty cool because you've got, it's nice playing with DMs because a player who is mindful of it being a team sport is a really, really important part of making that table really click. Yeah. And when you've got everyone who's being a DM, it's cool. It's nice having everyone realize they're all there for the same reason. So I should think about, I mean, we have had some folks, who have been players in the channel. It's usually them who run, when we stream games that are run by someone else, it's almost always people who play. The trouble is that I'm an insufferable player too, and I always want to do a stupid accent for my character. So like, I spent hours trying to master a West Country accent for this Hobbit that I played in those one ring things. So yeah, I may not be the best player to run for, so.
That's interesting. Yeah. Living over here, I've lost all of my accents. We're doing a Leagues of Adventure thing for Triple Ace games, which turned into a campaign, which is pretty exciting for me. And I'm going all in. I'm fighting my own instincts So it's pulp science, it's weird science, it's not real science by any stretch of the imagination.
Love it.
Which when I look at the videos afterwards, is a little painful because I like real science. So like they've got an airship that's held aloft by this carbolic acid electrofluidic paint, which means it's anti-gravity paint.
Yep. I'm on board.
but it's been a lot
again,
of fun.
right? So for like, if you're selling me that in Delta Green, I'm going to say that's bullshit. But for this, like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's been a lot of fun. But I found that we have a chef who's, of course, outrageously French. Yep. And the first 2 sessions I tried to do my outrageous French accent, but hearing it played back to me, it came out half French, half Scottish. So now I just say, and he says in his heavy French accent, and I don't even try anymore.
I think that I don't know if it's a combination of Groundskeeper Willie with like many of Mike Myers' early accents, because you and I are around the same age, and growing up watching those films and being exposed to that being the easy go-to accent to do. There's a lot of accents that I do that drift into that as well. All my dwarves are Scottish, and it's so tired to do that, but I can muster that accent, or at least a crap version of that. So
it's just like applying a filter, It's like, oh, I like this filter.
You know what it is? It's the same way of like, it's a way of making that character distinct from your own speaking voice, And I like you don't have to do that for any game or whatnot. It's what I like doing, and I like giving the characters to know, like, oh, that's this person, my players will never mistake when they're talking to a dwarf as opposed to a halfling or a gnome or whatever.
Or when they're talking to Kevin versus when they're talking to the character.
Precisely, yeah. And I'll even I find that I moderate my even my pace of speech and things like that. Where I'll because I'm an insufferable narcissist, so I'll watch my sessions back to see how things went and how things landed. But what else I've seen, like you have like a conversation with someone, and then you step back and go back to a normal conversational tone.
Yep.
That's also. That's to avoid players getting caught up in the emotion of the role play, too, because sometimes that can spill over into especially if you're in a fight with an NPC, that's a nice way of just taking a step back and being like, we're all friends here. We're just having this guy you really hate, but Kev you like. So
I didn't burn down your house.
Exactly. Jeez. So you run an awful lot of Ubiquity-based games too. What got you into that system in the first place?
Dumb luck. I was just surfing around through DriveThru RPG and saw the cover, and that always makes me laugh because I've openly stated many times we should not judge these books by their covers. There's some real stinkers out there with beautiful covers. But quite honestly, I saw All for One, Regime Diabolique, with Musketeer fighting werewolves by lantern light in Gothic Paris. And I was like, what is that? And
is it Ron Frenz who does the art on the cover, or is it someone else?
That I could be wrong. I thought, I don't know. I'm not going to say who I thought it was.
Oh, I see. I honestly don't know. I don't own it, but just the look of it had the same kind of frenetic, sketchy kind of quality to his art, which is, it's or not Ron Spencer is what I'm thinking of, not Ron Frenz. Ron Frenz is a comic artist.
Anyway, I discovered that Ubiquity system, the Ubiquity role-playing system, was licensed from Hollow Earth Expeditions, so I picked that up, and I saw 2 Dynamite games in a row, and then I found Desolation, which is pretty much right down my alley for fantasy at this point in my life. And it's like, how does it get any better than this? And well, Leagues of Adventure came along. It's like, that's how it gets better than this. And then it was, Leagues of Gothic Horror. By that time, I was working as an editor for AAA's. So I get to see them first.
Nice.
And then I have to wait for like a year to be able to talk about them. And then...
So one thing AAA should look into, navigating their website is a fucking nightmare. Because of the way you can't just display all of the products. You have to go through all. It's like a nesting doll.
Yeah. Each separate line.
Which is so if you have a pipeline to them, they may want to give some thought to the workflow, because the games look super cool. Just the trying to like go through and snag a bunch of stuff was just very challenging.
These days, my dream game is Leagues of Cthulhu. So it's Leagues of Adventure.
Yeah.
But with the Wiggy's take on Lovecraft's dystopian view of that era. And
cool.
So it's Edwardian or pre-Edwardian, and just dynamite.
So you could use because I saw you did an unboxing for it. I've got a copy of it as well too. Raiders de Relie.
Yeah.
That's got, because that's that same type of time period, right?
Right. It's a little later, but it's smack dab in the Edwardian period. But
cool.
Yes, it's I mean that's OpenQuest, or a modified version of OpenQuest, is pretty dynamite. I ran that for a little while. I tend toward mystery games. So when you were talking about mysteries before, I mean, this is something you experience. Either people aren't used to flexing their muscles to actually solving a mystery. They're used to like watching them play out on TV or in books or whatever. But there's also the sense that I'm not going to be able to solve the mystery. And then coupled with that is some game styles, there are cues or signals, like, well, for example, I mean, a dungeon is one example. Like, you can go left or you can go right. Which would you like to do? And people are maybe subconsciously programmed to expect the game master to lead them to the next clue. And you can find games where that happens. I mean, you can look at something along the lines of Gumshoe, and with its use of points and the way its skills make these very hyper competent characters, you get this interaction between the game master and the player about, these are all the things that are important. The player still has to work with them, but they don't have to work with identifying them. And they can choose to manage their resources to get more of them or not. And like when they get it, they get it, and they can move on. But that's like the game master and the players are moving from scene to scene in a mystery. Whereas I'll run mysteries where there's information, and you'll get it or you won't. And we'll either tell the story of where you got it and solve the mystery, or you didn't and you didn't solve the mystery. And it's my job to make either one of those outcomes fun along the way or interesting along the way.
I take a more of a in the old school scene, they call it the quantum ogre, where like you're going to run into this ogre one way or the other. It doesn't matter where you go.
Would you like to go left or left?
Yes. And I like something that I took from Gumshoe is the idea that like there's all different ways you can get to the same clues. Clues are not necessarily the evidence; it's the information that leads you to pursuing the next bit of evidence, and that can come from different sources. Call of Cthulhu, I think in the 7th might incorporate that kind of advice too, but Gumshoe is the first place I remember them saying like, "Look, we're all trying to get to the same point here, so just." You don't need to. There's not one way to get through it. When I was a kid, I used to run Call of Cthulhu like that, and that they didn't. You ever played The Haunting? It's the adventure. Yeah. So for folks who may not have played it, spoilers for a 40-year-old adventure, but the game really comes down to you noticing that in the basement there's one wall that looks different from other walls, and then once you notice that, then it goes through. And if players don't get that, you just can't get beyond the adventure. And it's not a dice roll thing. You got to notice that damn thing. And we had one group where I've run that thing, I don't know how many times. I've reskinned it a bunch of times too. I ran it as a Green Lantern adventure at one point with a haunted planet instead. It's a great setup.
Yeah.
But we had one time where players just couldn't get beyond it. And I'm like, I can't, just
it's interesting.
The damn wall.
Yeah, I mean, if I say BRP, like if I say D100, one of the first reactions I expect out there among gamers is, "Oh, it's so intuitive to use percents." And then you listen to the reports of their games, and you're expecting intuitive play, and what you get is, but they failed their roll, and they failed their roll, and they failed their roll, and I'm thinking, why were they rolling for that?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's percent. You roll. It's like, but the very first line in the skill section is you don't roll for normal stuff.
Yep.
And the game master
Delta Green
decides
goes
when you
one.
roll. Yeah.
Delta Green goes one further and suggests that there's tiers of things you don't roll for. So if you've got like a 70% in something, it's assumed you've got this level of capability, so you're never going to roll for X, Y, Z. And they actually incorporate that into, I don't know, there's an adventure called Caligata that came out that I think was either the first or one of the first ones for the actual Delta Green role-playing game. And they make extensive use of that in the adventure, which is really clever of a way of, really reinforcing.
It's so pervasive. It's like somewhere in a supplement for 4th edition Call of Cthulhu, I think, is where it came out, the idea that if you have this percent, then you are master's degree level, and this percent you're a PhD, this many years of experience, and so you should assess things. It was a piece of advice, and then that got boiled into 5th and stayed on through 6th. But I mean, these are just like sentences in paragraphs, and so people miss them, especially if Call of Cthulhu is their one-shot like Halloween game. You can't really expect them to go through with a fine-tooth comb. But it's like when the character walks into the room and they see a wall, and let's say they followed someone into that room, and they walk in and the person isn't there, and then they go, well, what do I do? And so we've got old school players who will methodically search the room, and they'll describe how they're searching it. And then their game master says, okay, roll spot hidden. Yeah. Why? Or they walk and say, well, what do I do? And they say, well, roll spot hidden. 97. Okay, well, you failed.
Yeah.
There's a, how does this happen? So now, an awful lot of games now they're doubling down on the game master advice, which I love, because I see game books as instruction manuals for playing the game. Yep. It shouldn't be like some IKEA furniture where they give you some indescribable tool and there's just kind of like vague lines across this folded piece of paper. It should be, this is what we meant. This is, these are the terms that we're using, and try this. Yeah.
Well, and then that's the thing. Like I buy more games than I'll ever run. Like I think every gamer does, or most gamers do at least. But I try to find something that I can draw from everything. It sounds very flaky, but I mean, I really genuinely do. Like there's ideas I'll get from one game that I'll never run, but it's like, oh, that's a really cool way of thinking about X. I don't run an awful lot of like the Apocalypse World or like story games. Partly because it's not really my players don't really like that stuff as much. But I love thinking of like what's going on in the story as the fiction, because all those games refer to it as fiction first, and I really, really love that, because even in old school games, it's the thing that one of the things that brought me back to old school games was Blades in the Dark. Oddly enough, Blades in the Dark is for those who aren't familiar with it. Have you run it on your channel or not?
I haven't run it. No. Just unboxed it.
Okay, so then the game is it is a game based. It's become a springboard for other games as well too. They're calling them Forged in the Dark. It's similar to a lot of Apocalypse World style games, but it is a little more concrete, and the task resolution is a little closer to traditional games or to games that use specified dice, because there's a lot of interpreting dice results. That got me thinking of like, wait, hold on. All you're really doing is rolling 1 or 2 D6s, and then you're extrapolating from that what's happening in the fiction. That's what we used to do with old school D&D.
Oh yeah.
Like, because we always had to fill in. There wasn't enough mechanics there to really make for. You weren't engaging in a lot of different gamist parts of it. You were filling in the story and whatever. Yeah. And that's, for myself, it went back to that. But it's a really good way of describing the appeal of that style of play, is because it's very much like some of those ones where you got a very bare bones set of rules that are robust enough for you to be able to improvise and whatever else. And
with a framework for you to do your improvisation. And then that's the skill that people don't have right out of the box. That's a skill that we developed because we didn't have any other choice. Either we played badly and stopped playing, or we found by luck our way to to some kind of good experience. So,
well, the funniest thing with when you first introduce people, especially for games that involve combat, a lot of times you'll find those players, not everyone, but I mean a lot of players who just they want to try shit. They don't look at the character sheet and trying to optimize. They're like, I got a buddy who routinely plays his characters just however never optimize. It's always like, okay, I'm going to take my alchemist who is not a melee combatant and does not really have a lot of good, hit points. He's going to run up and jump in and start fighting these things because that's how his character's personality is, and he likes playing it that way. And fair dues, or trying to do crazy crap like jumping off of things or whatever, and
just to see what the dice say.
Yeah, and so when you've got a game that is lighter on its feet, that allows you to looking at Mythras again. I know you run a lot of Mythras.
Yeah.
Seeing the way the special effects seem to work in the game and enable you to kind of improvise, results in the course of tactical combat. That's very cool, and I think that is something that's. It's easier to just engage your imagination than trying to, run what you want to do or what you've got in your head through the lens of a game mechanic that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, like sort of for me, like that's why I seem to lean more towards the systems that are a little lighter on their feet. Says the guy who also runs Champions, I guess, but.
We all have our exceptions, right?
Exactly.
I like Ubiquity because it's so very, very fast. A lot of things are pulled down into one roll and that you can narrate from, or you don't even have to roll. Like especially on the game master side, it's usually better not to roll so that you can put your full attention on description and expansion of what's happening, and then you get that fast, furious kind of feeling.
Do you have, do you run a lot of games where the players do all the rolling? Lifer does that, Symbaroom does that, Cult does that. Apocalypse Worlds games do that.
There's a lot of times where in Ubiquity I'll roll because I want to, and because it'll be fun. But with this Leagues of Adventure campaign, I haven't rolled. I haven't even taken dice out of the cabinet. Kind of thing, because I really want to work on that fast pace and the perilous feel of it. Because we got really moody when we did All for One, and it was a very, very dark and very emotional game, and there was a lot of dice rolls in that, and the dice were really punching us in the neck a lot of the time. And I rolled 14 dice. I can expect, according to the math, 7 successes. Got 1. I can't even comprehend how that was possible. So it's been a pretty moving campaign. But generally speaking, I didn't mind it in Powered by the Apocalypse games that I've played. But there are situations that game or games built that way put you in that do make me a little uncomfortable because of my own bias. My bias toward discovery. As the MC, you are pushing. You're driving those characters to reveal who they are. You're putting them in uncomfortable situations. You're causing drama, right? And it's you're sitting there saying, "All right, a guy walks in and smashes you in the face. Take 1 harm." And that's just a little bit too far for me. Even as a game master, I don't really want to be able to have those abilities.
Yeah.
But
I agree. It's so the game of those games, the thing that the one that's hit my sweet spot is City of Mists from Son of Oak Studios, and you play the setup is you're playing a pulp noir game where the characters are embodiments of mythological or fiction characters. So it could be King Arthur, or it could be Excalibur, or it could be, Legba, or whatever, like whatever character you want to. It could be Marilyn Monroe, Paul Bunyan, who knows? So, but it's a really neat sort of middle ground between. It's got elements of Fate, it's got elements of Apocalypse World, but it feels a little closer to a traditional game. It still has moves and stuff. So, like the way that you interface with the game mechanics is still very much in that kind of Apocalypse World story game style, which sometimes can feel and I wonder whether it's jarring because it's just not the way that I run every other game, but I find it jarring sometimes. But that one has the smoothest. That's not true. Cult Divinity Lost is also that the mechanics in that are quite good as well too. I find them to be closer to a trad game than a story game.
Yeah, I find that most of the arguments or the debates online about games, when you strip it all away, it comes down to preference in the end.
Totally, absolutely.
And it's difficult sometimes to recognize it in yourself or in someone else, or to say, okay, this is my preference, and know when to value your preference.
Yep.
And when it's time to jettison the preference, and it's never the same, from game to game or group to group. So
no, and it's funny because like there's so many, there's so many, and I don't know if it's just because it attracts more attention or whatnot, but there's so many folks who have what they present as the concrete. This is the way you do things, and it's like, what are you talking? What are you talking about? Any game says make it. It's different for people are different, groups are different because there's always a different dynamic and chemistry at the table. Yeah. Anyone who's worked in a workplace ever and has had one person who's made that workplace intolerable, even though it's one person, knows what it's like for that chemistry and fit is such a big thing with the game. And to take things as absolutes in any gaming stuff is just bonkers to me. It's one of the reasons why I feel no compunctions against house ruling stuff all the time. It's not what everyone would want. Like there's some players who will be very unhappy in my groups because of my reason for that. But with our group, it works. That they're and I.
Well, that's the demonstration of the Holy Trinity, right? Talk with the players, choose the right game, and be a part of the solution, not a problem.
Absolutely. I saw it. Owen K. Wilson, who's he's been around for a long, long time, lead designer on Starfinder, and he's currently working for Green Ronin. He posted something about saying that he thought that before he became a designer, in the last little while, he's been on Twitter running these the sort of like adages about like what real RPG design is like, and it's been really illuminating. But the thing to comment today was about how he thought the majority of people wanted to take the rules and then interpret them at the table and whatever, and make their own experience by interpreting them on a good faith way. He said, working as a designer has proved otherwise. And it's like, man, like I really wish he had. I don't doubt that for a second, because there's, he certainly has
his experience with that effect, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a shame because I don't know, like you've had to go through a lot of different gaming groups as well too. Overwhelmingly, I've had bad apples for sure, but I mean, I've never had that experience that has soured me so much that I don't feel like the majority of the people I get to play with. I'm fortunate in that sense, I guess, but the majority of people I've interacted with, especially since I've started streaming, have been terrific. The people who genuinely want to, I'm not seeing bad faith arguments. I'm not seeing, that's not true. You have a YouTube channel, so you get shit posts sometimes. So that happens sometimes. But for the vast majority of the people that we're seeing who are gamers and whatnot, overwhelmingly, it's always, especially for something that's it is not a necessity in life. Like, it is not something I need to be alive. You can talk about it being a way about quality of life, but it's not food, it's not oxygen, it's not shelter. So it is it's a hobby. It's a lark, right?
Although there was a original series Star Trek episode where they said the greater the mind, the greater the need for play, or the simplicity of play. I think that was shore leave. But
I mean, people like different things, and if the folks that I've been fortunate to deal with, again, and even people in the community as well too, in the wider YouTube community, every other streamer I've met and whatnot, I've had overwhelmingly wonderful interactions with them too. I mean, you're a son of a bitch, but I mean
I know, it's just and it's been that way for so long that I'm not even going to try and change it.
Exactly.
So on that note, heroes save villages.
Yes. So I'll send you a link to that too. So there will be a link to Hero Save Villages in the bottom. All donations to Hero Save Villages go directly to SOS Children's Villages International. None of it goes to my channel, Anthony's channel, anyone else, no other middlemen. It all just goes to help out the kids and who benefit from SOS Children's Villages. And it also gives you a chance to win some really cool gaming stuff as well too, for the raffle at least. And you can get tickets to the raffle up until noon Mountain Standard Time on September 1st, 2020. Excellent. Anthony, thank you so much for hosting me
Thanks
today.
For being
this was
here.
a shit ton of fun. I could keep talking to you forever, but
yes, we have the gift.
Yeah, really.
All right. So take care, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.